What is the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life that you can't explain? Once I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I could see the outline of someone standing there, but when I turned on the light, there was no one there. The door was still slowly closing, as if whoever or whatever had been there was leaving. Even creepier, my Nest fire alarm had illuminated in the corridor, sensing movement, but there was nobody there. Still gives me chills thinking about it. I was riding my bike down a rural road when I was 9 and found a garbage bag filled with red sludge and white sticks. I thought it was blood and bones, but I had a very PG childhood and I had never even seen pretend blood and bones, so I had nothing to compare to. I told myself it wasn't what I thought it was. After all, why would there be a ripped open garbage bag filled with blood and bones? 2 days later, I thought, look again, and if it is what you think it is, tell a grown-up. I biked back to the area and it was gone. I am now old and have watched enough to confirm it was blood and bones. I was going for an hour-long run down a gravel road back in 2013. It was a fairly well-known rural rail trail, but not too busy. The closest parking spot was a couple miles away at that point, and I'm headed back to my car. In the distance, I see some guy walking towards me. As I get closer, I can see him better, but something feels off. It's an older guy, maybe in his 70s, while he looked clean and not homeless. His skin is gray, his eyes are gray, his hair is gray. He's wearing an all-gray sweatsuit, and he's smiling. He's been smiling the entire time. The man is 200 meters away and smiling, not in greeting, just a full-toothed grin walking down the middle of this path. He has a full black plastic bag slung over his shoulder. I start feeling really uneasy as I get closer, and then I begin to feel nauseous. At maybe 20 feet away, I wave hi, but he's still in the middle of the trail. He's still smiling. He has no change in reaction to my greeting. I want to run the opposite direction, but that would be going further away from my car. I pass by him, running partially on the grass because he's still in the middle of the trail, and this massive wave of nausea passes over me, and I nearly puke. The smell was so bad, I want to say it smelled like death, but somehow it was worse. I just start sprinting, maybe 200 meters. I turn to look back, and the man is gone. It's a flat, rural area. I can see for miles, and this man is gone, along with his black plastic bag. It still creeps me out to this day. So in college, I studied in the UK. I lived in a house with a group of other American students that had stories of the ghost of a girl who passed away while living there. I never believed in any of it, but it was fun to play along. The kitchen had one way in and out, and right after you entered the kitchen to your right was a padlocked door to the cellar, where she allegedly lived. I had the only key. We were all a little homesick near Thanksgiving, so decided to do a meal together. This required some creative cooking schedules due to small appliances in the kitchen, so one girl who didn't have class the next day offered to stay up late to get the turkey going. We went into the cellar the first and only time that evening to get larger cooking implements. At 2:04 in the morning, I wake up to my door rattling, like someone was pushing against it. I assumed it was a housemate who just went to the wrong door. About 30 seconds later, when I hear a scratchy female voice softly saying, "Hello," every 5 seconds or so. My window was open, and it sounded like it was coming from outside. So I get up to close my window as I assume it's some drunk girl walking back from the pub. I get to the window, and there's no one there. And then I hear, "Hello?" clear as a bell behind me. My door rattles again and goes silent. I've had night terrors before and hallucinate when I have even a mild fever, so I assume I'm still asleep and lay back down. The next morning at 7 a.m., the girl who's cooking tells me I had the creepiest night. At 1:50, I heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs, then the door rattled. Then at 2:10, the door rattled again, and I heard footsteps coming down. She told me this before I had said anything to anyone about what I'd experienced. Working in a nursing home for years during the night, and everyone always complained of weird stuff like noises on the top floor. I never believe in any of that, so I was always the one going upstairs to do night checks. One night, I was changing a resident on that floor with a colleague, and my colleague complained he heard something like people walking. We were in the resident room, and I had to go to the cupboard at end of that corridor to get bed sheets. And when I was coming back with the bed sheets, I kept hearing steps and like if someone was touching and opening plastic bags. I was so annoyed and looked outside the room and saw a shadow passing the corridor. The issue is that the shadow was so big, like if literally a person just passed by, along with step noises and plastic bags. I freak out so badly and froze completely. I had to call another colleague to come upstairs because I was so scared of coming out of the resident room. Bear in mind that I do not believe in those things, and for 2 years I was always the one doing night checks on the top floor and bottom floor on my own. Never had any problem and never saw something. Since that day, I never went upstairs alone and was always very scared. This isn't my story, it's my uncle's. A bit of backstory. He used to work on the London Underground doing maintenance to the tracks, tunnels, etc. Once he went into a tunnel with 2 other colleagues. They'd stopped to do something, and this man said to my uncle, like, "Hey, uncle's name, can you show me the way out?" My uncle, thinking it was one of his guys, said, "You know the way out." I think he was so engrossed in his work that he didn't turn around to see this bloke to start with. So this guy says, "I'm so cold." Then my uncle said he immediately felt dead cold and the air around him dropped. Not sure what he meant by that. So my uncle turns round and shines a light on him. My uncle said to me, this bloke is what he would call a ghost standing there. He was holding a really old vintage lamp and wearing a really old, dirty uniform. He said the feeling he got was so strange, as if he knew this bloke was a ghost. The bloke just kept saying over and over again, "I'm so cold, I'm so cold." My uncle eventually said to this guy, "I don't think you're supposed to be here, mate. Can you see a light anywhere?" And he looked dead at my uncle and said, "Can you help me? I'm so cold." I'm unsure if the colleagues came to see who my uncle was talking to, but one of them tried to approach this bloke, thinking it was someone in their team playing a joke, and this bloke just disappeared right in front of their eyes. All of them freaked out and ran. They refused to go back into the tunnel. My uncle and 2 colleagues refused to go down that tunnel again. Some other colleagues have said they've seen this bloke, and he always says how cold he is. My uncle's retired now, but says he thinks of this bloke from time to time. When I was 9 years old, I was biking home in the evening. We lived in the countryside up a small mountain. The road from the village was an uphill, a flat section, and then another uphill. The road lights only stretched to the end of the flat section. I was a bit afraid of the dark, so I stopped at the end of the road lights, just at the bottom of the last uphill, to gather courage to bike the last section home. It was a partial moon, so it wasn't pitch black, and at the end of the uphill, I saw a figure walking down towards me. I thought I'd wait until she got closer, as I would feel less afraid to bike in the dark if there was someone else close. But about halfway down the hill, the person walked into a thin shadow of a tree on the road and never came back out. Just disappeared. I stood there for a while trying to figure out what I just saw, and then panicked and biked down to the village and stayed there until my parents came driving and wondered why I never came home. They tried to explain it with stuff like the person might have gone into the woods or something. What they didn't disclose, though, out of fear that I'd never dare to bike home again, was that my father had seen the same thing walking home from work. He had seen her clear as day, walking down the hill for a while. When he looked down for just a second and looked up, she was gone, and there were no footsteps in the fresh snow. I later read a book about local legends, and apparently a lot of people, during at least a century, have seen her walking down the hill and disappearing halfway down. My youngest daughter loved this story, so we've been on ghost stakeouts where we buy pizzas and snacks and hang out at the bottom of the hill, listening to the Ghostbusters theme song and try to see the ghost.